So I'm Denny Daniel. I curate the museum and founded the Museum of Interesting Things, which is a traveling museum. Normally, the Museum of Interesting Things goes to schools, libraries, events physically. And now, COVID did do one advantage. We're able to do things virtually all over the planet, which is earth shattering. But yeah, normally we would go to schools and libraries all over the place and show people that their iPhones, their iPods, they didn't pop out of thin air. They came from a long line of inventions. In fact, pretty much everything you're going to see tonight, you could probably do with your one iPhone. But if you were alive 100 years ago, you would have to have all my stuff in your pocket to do what your one smartphone does. Oh, and by the way, later on I'm doing, for someone else, I'm doing a show on the history of invention. So I want to bring you my smartphone. So that's the smartphone I'm going to be using today. So Veronica, I hope you guys are compatible with this.
Oh yeah, totally great.
Excellent, good. This is actually the first smartphone from 1992. It's the Simon, and it actually did have a touch screen. And believe it or not, you could do email and everything, address book and everything with this device. It was very expensive, and the telephone calls were also very expensive. So it didn't take on, it didn't catch on as much as our smartphones today caught on, but it was a huge thing back then. So every week, normally we do a speakeasy, and we have many, many themes at the speakeasy and at, as Veronica mentioned, at the library. So tonight's theme is the history of New York on 16 millimeter film. And I amassed an enormous and amazing collection of 16 millimeter films. I think tonight we go 1 hour, but we could probably go until 4 a.m. if Veronica decided to turn the library into a rave. I'm not sure she wants to do that yet. They may lose their funding for that, or may have more funding, who knows. So I picked the absolute best of the lot for today. And I always like to start with the first film being kind of a little, conglomerate of a bunch of things in New York. It's a very early film called New York, City of Wonder. And it's done by Castle Films. And Castle Films was kind of the Blockbuster Video or Netflix of 100 years ago, or nearly 100 years ago. Eugene Castle was a director and a filmmaker, and he would often buy the rights to many films and make these short edits of the films, or he would do his own filming and make these short edits, like around 10 minutes, and sell them. So let's say you wanted to see Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but the film is an hour and a half long. He would sell you or rent you a short version of it, a 10-minute version. And these were very cool, very collectible, and very wanted by people. There's just kind of a instant gratification. So that now you know that instant gratification started way before our generation, funny enough. So this is a Castle Films. It's a silent, and I'm going to use some music that isn't protected. It's this funky record I bought. Very, very cool, really bizarre music. And fortunately, if the library wants to put this later on YouTube or something, they'll be able to without YouTube or Facebook getting annoyed and taking down the music. So for the silent films, I'm going to keep using this record and play for that. But I'll also try to talk a little bit and let you guys know a little bit about some of the things you're seeing as well during some of the silent films. Okay, so let's start our first film. So they formed communities like the Palms and the Toms. Washington Square Park starts in 1871. There was a potter's field from 1797 to 1826. At one time, there was a creek there called Monetta's Creek. The cemetery closed in 1825, and then it was a military parade ground. That arch was built in 1889, the Washington Square Arch. That might be too low. So Penn Station opened around 1910. It took 5 years to construct. And the demolition of Penn Station, most people don't know, is from it took from around 1963 to 1968. And the Empire State Building was built 1930 to 31. It's 102 floors, the Art Deco building. And it was the tallest in the world up until 1970. Before that, it was the Waldorf Astoria in 1893. The Chrysler buildings from 1930. It was the tallest for 11 months until the Empire State Building took it over. And you were seeing the New York Public Library. The main branch, 1895 until 1911, it became the main branch. And it was John Jacob Astor who started it from his will in the Beaux-Arts style. St. Patrick's from 1878, Neo-Gothic, and originally it was in Soho. And you can still visit the St. Patrick's in Soho now. It was 50th to 51st Street was originally a Jesuit college till 1814, and then it was sold to the people that run it now. Rockefeller City is from around 1839. It was meant to be part of the Met. It was originally Columbia University's land, and it was leased to Rockefeller in 1928. And it was supposed to be built for RCA, the radio company. It was a botanic garden between 1801 and 1811. So Grant's tomb, there was that Groucho Marx joke, who's buried there? And no one, because it's actually a mausoleum. So Grant is there, but he's not buried, he's above ground. And that was Groucho Marx's joke. It's from 1897. There it is, Grant's tomb. Oh no, there's the Riverside Church. So Harlem is originally in the Netherlands. That's where it comes from. The Dutch settled there in 1658. It was a farm for 200 years. It was originally Irish and Italian. And it was only after the 1900s where it becomes the African cultural movement and jazz and all that. Times Square basically becomes Times Square around 1904. Before that, it was Longacre Square. It was named after, of course, the New York Times building. And of course, that's where our ball drop is. In 1872, it was the center for like a New Year's horse carriage. And the first theater is around 1872, the Olympia Theater by the Hammersteins. In the 1890s when you had the full of lights there. I hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, now if you were alive 100 years ago, you'd have someone accompanying with music, maybe a piano player, or you would have one of these. Let me pull it over. A wax cylinder player. These were invented by Thomas Edison around 1877. This one is from the late 1800s, early 1900s. This one was from the Columbia Company. This is kind of a portable version of it. Let me get the horn on it. There you go. We'll move it back a bit so you see the horn better. Excellent. So these wax cylinders, they were made out of wax, beeswax, and a few other ingredients to make it a little more sturdy. And the later ones were made out of celluloid. So there's a celluloid one, and on the machine is an original wax one. And I know that your telephones could hold a lot of music on them. Well, this only held, the first ones held 2 minutes of music, and the later ones only held 4 minutes of music. And it was basically run by a spring. The spring's inside here. And being that we're doing a New York show, I picked a very New York song. And I'm not going to play the whole 2 minutes. I'm just going to play the New York part. The song is done by Ada Jones. And it's I'm the Only Star That Twinkles on Broadway. I don't mean me. I mean Veronica. So that is an original Thomas Edison cylinder record player. Of course, Thomas Edison was, well, over the water in New Jersey, but he was the one who illuminated New York by inventing the light bulb and inventing, of course, that was his favorite invention, the record player. So the next one I'm playing, let me take a look and make sure I got it right here. Yes. Okay, so this one is kind of for you guys. This one is on the Hudson. So this is the downtown, let me see what it's called exactly. Get it right. The Downtown Highway. This film is from around, I think, 1981, but it gives you a nice, good history of the Hudson. But let me give you a couple of anecdotes because this one is sound. So let me give you a couple of anecdotes that you may want to know. And I've got my little note sheet, so I make sure that I get it right for you because you never want to get these things wrong. So Henry Hudson sailed 1609. He was an Englishman for the Dutch East India Company, and it's around 305 miles. Verrazano explored it for France in 1524, and originally it was called the North River. For the Indians, it was, and God knows how to pronounce this, Cahohatati, the river, and that was the Iroquois. And it's the Mohican that are for the Manhattan, that we get the Manhattan name. The Hudson name starts around 1740 on the map. A fun little thing that I learned when I was working with a friend of mine who's a park ecologist is we know the Adirondack Mountains. He had taught me that the Adirondack means it's named after the people that were kind of living the wilderness men. And Adirondack means tree eater. And it's because they would eat part of the tree bark. Now, they weren't taking tree bark off trees and biting into it like a, Fig Newton or something, or a cookie. I've done this, but don't try this at home. You have to know which tree to do this with. But there are certain trees where you can pull off the bark, and on the back, it's green, and that green can actually sustain you. That's actually edible. And you have to have a proper parks ecologist to tell you which one to eat, because you don't want to get poisoned, obviously. But I was with one, and he taught me which one to eat. And so that's why they call it Adirondack. It's named after the tree eaters. Okay, so let me get that film on for you so that you can learn even more, but I figured I'd give you a few little tidbits before I start the film. So this one is the Henry Hudson area.
The Empire State is blessed with more wonderful scenic water attractions than any other section of the country. They include two great lakes, Lake Champlain, the Finger Lakes, and hundreds of others. Then there's Niagara Falls, the Thousand Islands, Long Island Sound, and the Atlantic Ocean. Our film is the story of the majestic Hudson River, a sporting water highway that has its source in the northeast corner of the state, high in the Adirondack Mountains. The highest point in New York State is Mount Marcy, 5,344 feet elevation. It's a fine observation point for ranger and climber. And as they descend, they get a bird's eye view of Lake Tear of the Clouds, the source of the Hudson River. This small pond nestles snugly in the side of Marcy, about 1,000 feet below the summit. From this mountain pond, we'll follow its course 300 miles to sea. First, the small mountain brook. A little farther, our baby Hudson takes its first big step and gracefully spills over Spearfish Falls. In the lower Adirondacks, it has become of age and is a good-sized rushing stream. Near Troy, it's a full-grown navigable river and the most important water highway in eastern United States. At the capital city of Albany, 300 outboard adventurers are off on the annual Hudson Race to Manhattan. This grueling marathon of 140 miles is the largest outboard race in the world. Hundreds try, but relatively few finish. It's an orgy of roaring motors and endless bumps. A driver has to average about 40 miles per hour to keep in the race, and all the time battle tides and currents. It's a rugged test of stamina and driving skill. Halfway down, the leaders are so far out in front it hardly looks like a race. But this beautiful straight stretch of river near Poughkeepsie is famous for another type of sporting craft, crew racing. Here, annually, the championship intercollegiate rowing races are held. The huge letters painted on the rocky shores are symbolic of winning college crews. Every June, about 350 oarsmen representing crews of a dozen or more colleges gather here 2 weeks prior to the regatta to study tides and currents and to practice long hours for the championship. For one day, Poughkeepsie is the biggest college town in America. They finish below the bridge, and we resume our downstream cruise. The Hudson is navigable all the way up to Albany, so cargo vessels from the world's ports pass you up as you pass down. Below Newburgh on the west shore is famous Storm King Mountain with the star of its motor highway halfway up its precipitous side. Below, a smoky freight train winds along like a dark serpent. That's Sugarloaf Mountain, in olden days a river beacon for skippers of sailing schooners. The New York Central's rails follow both banks of the river. The east shore is the main line, and modern streamliners flash by like miniature trains of a boy's dream world. Stories of revolutionary times reflected every turn as we near West Point. It was here that George Washington stretched an iron chain across the river to stop British warships. Some of the buildings of the U.S. Military Academy border right on the river's edge. Just below West Point, the famed Bear Mountain Suspension Bridge spans the river for the benefit of millions of New Yorkers seeking outdoor recreation at this famous park. Below Peekskill, the river widens into what the early Dutch settlers called the Tappan Zee. On this expansive river, 15 miles long and 5 miles wide, sailing is the sport. Communities on both sides support yacht clubs. The group underway is a class of lightnings from the Ossining Club. Yes, our Hudson plays host to every type of sporting craft, and sailing runs a close second in popularity. Below the Palisades, the Englewood Yacht Basin harbors a fleet of power cruisers that stage an annual 10-mile free-for-all, which certainly churns up the river. Canoeists race with double-bladed paddles in midstream right off the shore of Upper Manhattan. These sturdy lads are from the Inwood Racing Canoe Club. The Hudson here is a great river, almost 2 miles wide, and canoeing is only safe for the expert. The Dayline Sidewheeler glorifies the name of Robert Fulton, inventor of the world's first steamboat, which had its trial run right here on the Hudson. This little Swiss Family Robinson isn't the least bit shipwrecked, and the adventure is just a Sunday outing, especially for the little lady in the bow. New York City's only Hudson span is the giant $75 million George Washington Bridge, connecting Upper Manhattan with New Jersey suburbs. Motor traffic going up the Hudson Valley skirts the river on the West Side Highway. Here's the river's top speedboat classic, the Harwood Trophy Race around Manhattan Island. 28 nautical miles of marine madness in less than 28 minutes elapsed time. Started in 1912, this is one of America's oldest motorboat races, with varied classifications for runabouts, speedboats, and hydroplanes. Dodging traffic and driftwood is a sporting thrill. Here comes, or there goes, popular Guy Lombardo piloting Miss Tempo. Each craft races against time, so we'll let them pass and proceed down our marine highway to view lower Manhattan from the Jersey piers. Cargoes from the world ports enter our famous river at this point. Miss Liberty welcomes the arrival and bids farewell to more ships and more tonnage than enters any other port in the world. Poking her nose downstream for her shuttle race across the Atlantic is the mighty Queen Elizabeth, Queen of the Superliners, largest ship in the world. Stern of her to glimpse the battery's famous skyline, visual American trademark outfit. 300 miles from where we started, our downstream highway goes to sea.
So I hope you enjoyed that. As I mentioned, every week we do a speakeasy. That's a different theme. The next one this coming Sunday is the Oddities Film Festival, all our artist films. So I put my email in the chat, and you are welcome to email me, and I'll give you the secret code for that. Someone just texted me something, and I don't know why it's not coming up in the chat. Someone wrote about something about a tea. No, my email is just dennydanielx@gmail.com. So I don't know what. Oh, are you asking if the word "the" for the museum's website? It's museumofinterestingthings.org. So I always try to show a couple of items that are New York items. This is a stereoscope from the 1800s, and the stereoscope image there is from Coney Island. That is the loop stereoscope. And the way it would work was you'd move it like this, and you'd get a 3D image from over 100 years ago. And soon we're going to show some Coney Island footage that I've got queued up for you. But the next one I'm going to show is on the New York City subway system. It's a very, very early film of the New York City subway. And this film was actually shot by Edison in those very early days. So enjoy. Okay, so I'm going to play the next film. This one does have a soundtrack. So I hope you enjoyed that one. The next one is amazing footage of the Niagara Falls. And I'm gonna, before it starts, I wanna give you a little bit of interesting tidbits about the Niagara Falls. First of all, it formed over 12,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age. So the ice basically melted into the Niagara Falls. And it's made of basically three waterfalls. So you've got the Horseshoe Falls, which we all know and love, the American Falls on our side, and then the Bridal Veil Falls. And the time when, you know, we of course we're using it for hydroelectric power. You know, I don't know if you know about the big competition between Thomas Edison and Tesla to utilize it for as a power, you know, for power. And of course, Tesla wins that with Westinghouse. And it's, you know, as far as the freezing over, it's actually only frozen over completely once. And that was in 1848, March 29th, 1848. And that was because of an ice jam. Every other time you see it frozen, it's not completely frozen, it's partially frozen. And of course, everybody knows about going over the falls in a barrel. All right, well, there was one guy, Sam Patch, the Yankee leapster. He was the first person to go over, but not in a barrel. The first one to go in a barrel was 1901, and that was a Michigan school teacher, believe it or not. She did it October 24th, 1901. And believe it or not, this would so not work today. She sent her cat first to test it, and then she went. Yeah, my cat Tristan wouldn't appreciate that. So over 12 people have tried, and now it's illegal to go over. So don't get any ideas to try to go over. Veronica and I are not condoning going over with or without a barrel. The first two-person barrel was 1989. And there was a guy who actually skied with jet skis. He was called, that was this guy, Robert, who was nicknamed the Firecracker in 1995. And then there was, recently there was a guy who actually survived. He's the first one to survive the Horseshoe Falls without any flotation device whatsoever. That was 2003. And that guy actually wasn't trying to be a daredevil. He was actually trying to commit suicide, but he ironically didn't die. So here is a short film on the Niagara Falls. Enjoy. And it's a silent, so I'll play you some music. I hope you guys enjoyed that. So the next film is really earth-shattering. This one is the 1939 World's Fair. And with this one, something I always like to mention about World's Fairs. New York has had more than one New World's Fair. We've had at least three. There was one in like upstate Buffalo area, and then in 1939 in New York City in the park. And then, of course, the one that we all know and love, the 1964-65 World's Fair. But we've actually never had a World's Fair. Nope. The World's Fair Consortium in France, it started in England, and then the French kind of took it over and made all the rules. And according to the French rules, it's only supposed to last a few months, and it's then supposed to be completely torn down. And New York said, we're not building this giant city of wonder, you know, this insane amount of stuff, and only having it up for a couple of months and then ripping the whole thing apart. Yeah, no, we're New York. We're doing it for 2 years, and we're going to keep it. Now, I'm born and raised in Forest Hills, so I remember as a little child, we thought that was like a secret world. We used to ride our bicycles all over the place. So yeah, New York kept it. And it's still, you can still see parts of the World's Fair structures. But of course, France didn't technically condone it. So technically, New York has never had a World's Fair. And now they're not even called World's Fairs anymore anyway, they're called like expos. And they still kind of go on, but not at the grandeur that you're going to see in a moment. So this is the 1939 New York World's Fair. Enjoy.
Gateway to the $155 billion wonderland. From far and near come countless visitors. By every mode of travel, every means of transportation, they arrive to view the marvels of the greatest exposition in history. Outstanding landmark is the theme center, while the four freedoms, speech, press, assembly, and religion overlook Constitution Mall. 30 feet high, they symbolize the four rights of free Americans guaranteed by the Constitution. The 700-foot Trilon rises above all else, and the circling helicline that leads into the Paris Fair's exhibit Democracy is a pathway to the future. Thousands are treading to get a fascinating preview of things to come. Main Street of the Fair is the $60 million mall, extending from Theme Center to Federal Village. It is dominated by an heroic 65-foot statue of George Washington, a patriotic masterpiece by James Earl Fraser. Everywhere, sculptured settings add to the fair's unique appeal. Two towering pylons flank the Hall of Communication, and in the court is seen a sculptured tribute. The imposing British Pavilion houses one of the most impressive foreign exhibits, while the Hall of Nations displays the handicraft of smaller countries. America's own handsome federal building shows Uncle Sam at his best. It is bordered by still another Hall of Nations, where the rest of the foreign exhibits valued at $31 million are centered. In the court of states, North, South, East, and West are represented. From Pennsylvania's replica of the Cradle of Liberty to the Lone Star State starring reproduction of the Alamo.
Arizona, the Union's youngest state, contributes to the Star-Spangled Congress of Achievement. As does Maine most northern. Distinctive buildings like West Virginia's classical colonnades and Florida's tropical Spanish towers provide picturesque settings for the products of each section of this great land. Structures which strikingly recall the history and stress the climate of their respective domains. Roll of honor, stretching across plain and prairie, from coast to coast, showing the world the vast resources and the glories of America, the triumphs of city and country, farm and factory, a saga of democracy. A lightning bolt epitomizes man's harnessing of electricity. In this plaza of light, the nation's foremost companies present the magic of today that paves the way for the miracles of tomorrow. Symbols of more power to you and all the world. Signposts are the marvels of the modern electric era. A man-made Niagara features the building that houses the electric utilities display. Here is emphasized the forward march of America, resistless as the torrents flow. Through a transparent tunnel, visitors emerge directly beneath the roaring waterfall. Across the plaza, a water ballet of fountains plays an aquatic symphony before the City of Light, a study of the great metropolis from dawn to dusk and dusk to dawn. The Empire State Bridge leads to the amusement area, a rhythmic mile of fun and frolic. A 279-foot drop into the world of tomorrow. It's the greatest show on earth. Warm rhythms from Cuba. And hot from Harlem in the hot spots. They got rhythm, yeah, man. Little old New York shares the spotlight. And Boston Bell steps the Korean heavyweight, strips the light fantastic with abandon and breaks the reducing. Tons and tons of fun. Fun on ice, too. The Bears Midway Deluxe offers a skating extravaganza with all the thrills of a winter playland thrown in. And ski jumping by international champions of the world. In the transportation zone, outstanding exhibits by leaders of the auto industry present the highlights of the motor age, amazing conquest of time and space. Monument to mass production that put America on wheels. Here are symbolized the changes the automobile has wrought in our country, contributing to a new way of life, blazing a trail to the road of tomorrow. Sensational is the Futurama that projects you into 1960, the Highways and Horizons show. Railroads are on parade too. Crack foreign streamliners like Britain's Coronation Scott and Italy's 2-mile-a-minute Rome-Naples Express stand side by side with our fastest engines. Drama of the Iron Horse is a pageant portraying a century of railroad development. Colorful review from the stovepipe specials of yesterday to the streamliners of today and tomorrow. Nocturne. Spectacular illumination at the dark turns the fair into a futuristic fairyland, a study in lights and shadows of breathtaking beauty. A patriotic and stirring symphony of fireworks and fountains, water and light, a pyrotechnic salute to the world of tomorrow.
Isn't that beautiful? I love the World's Fair footage. So the next one is a Coney Island film. It's a short film. Coney Island, Coney, by the way, means rabbit. And it's because the island had a lot of rabbits on it. It's a Dutch word, actually. The first hotel was there around 1829. And in around 1868, it becomes kind of a resort town, Brighton Beach area and all that. 1878, we have the rail line, the Coney rail line. So around 1880 is when you start seeing it become more of an amusement area. Now, as far as the parks, you have Sea Lion Park from 1895 to around 1903. You've got Steeplechase Park. That's the one that George Tilyou started, and that's from around 1897 till 1964. Luna Park was from around 1903 to 1944. Dreamland was from around 1904 to 1911. And then, of course, Astroland, the one that we all grew up with, was from around 1962 to 2008. Coney Island has had numerous fires. The main ones, 1896, where the Elephant Hotel got burned. 1907, Steeplechase Park. 1911 was the big Dreamland fire. And then 1932 and 1944 with Luna Park. So there were a lot of fires. The piece I want to show you now is a 3D picture of the Elephant Hotel. If you've been to New Jersey and you've seen Lucy, it was the same designer. He built a giant hotel. It was on the beach around 12th Street. That was basically a giant wooden elephant that you could actually sleep in, believe it or not. Now I'm going to show you the footage of the Coney Island. Since we started a little late, we'll go a little bit over and play these two, and then and this one's probably around 3 minutes long. So enjoy the Coney Island footage. And this is a silent, so I'm going to play the music for you guys. So the next film I'm going to play is the only time you're ever going to be able to see this film. This is, I told you that Steeplechase Park was torn down in the 1960s. That was actually Fred Trump, believe it or not. And the demolition was a huge scandal. People protested. He refused to back down. And in the end, he ended up doing kind of a demolition party and demolished Steeplechase Park, which was one of the most iconic, of the parks that happened in Coney Island. Somebody took private footage of some of the demolition, and that's what you're going to watch today. So this is the I am the only owner of this footage. It's literally private footage of the Coney Island demolition. It's a very short reel, but I'm going to show it to you guys now so you get an idea of what that era was like and what happened. And then we'll end with one of my favorites. But the next film I'm going to play, let me pull out my little note thing here, is Sidewalks of New York. And this one is from the early 1900s. That's the name, Michael Bartlett, from around 1940s. It's a beautiful little singing thing. And speaking of singing things, I'm going to show you something really amazingly cool that you'll probably never see again. Believe it or not, you could go to the top of the Empire State Building and sing into a microphone, and they would record a souvenir record for you. That's right off the observation deck of the Empire State Building. And they gave you this great souvenir packaging and record. And you could record maybe happy birthday for your mom or your wife or your girlfriend, and give them this record. And often people would do this for the soldiers, and they'd mail it to the soldiers. This was a huge thing. They were called speakerphones. And there were many places in Manhattan where you could do this, but there was actually one on the observation deck. And I managed to get one of those records, a huge piece of New York history. So like I said, the next one is my last one for the night. It's called Sidewalks of New York. And this is what I think should happen on the sidewalks of New York. And this is the way I think police should be all the time on the sidewalks of New York. Clearly, this is the way they actually are. So take a look and enjoy.
London Bridge is falling down. Boys and girls together, me and Mamie or Rob, trip the light fantastic on the sidewalk of New York. She's my sweetheart, I'm her home. She's my Annie, I'm her song. Soon we'll marry, never to part. Little Annie Rooney is my sweetheart. East side, west side, all around the town. The clock sang ring around Rosie, London Bridge is falling down. Boys and girls together, me and Mamie O'Rourke, trip the light fantastic on the sidewalk of New York.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but pretty much every interaction I've ever had with a New York City police officer has been exactly like that. Hasn't it been for you? So I hope you guys enjoyed the story of New York on 16mm film and some of the cool items. Like I said, you are welcome, welcome, welcome to come to the museum virtually or live. Email me and I'll let you know all the hubbub and all the details for the speakeasies. Thank you so much, Veronica, for hosting us again. You guys are rock stars. It's the coolest library on the East Coast.